Good morning, gamers! I'm trying something a little different this week. No camera, so you don't have to put up with my ugly mug. In this week's episode of Will It Run, we will be looking at Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Wolong is an action RPG Souls-like game from the developers of the cult classic Nioh. Team Ninja is the name of the developers, if you were wondering, and it is set in ancient China. As always, we'll be putting the game through its paces, running on the most common hardware setup as per the Steam hardware survey. Our goal will be to see if we can get it running smoothly at a playable 60 frames per second. The hardware used is outlined in the description below. So with that out of the way, let's dive in and do what most tech YouTubers don't and test this game on the average gaming PC instead of the latest and greatest hardware and see if we can get a good enough frame rate to tame these ancient Chinese beasts. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me out greatly. Yes, that's right. Press that like and subscribe button. Yeah, you know you want to. One final note before we jump into the nuts and bolts of today's video, your feedback is greatly appreciated. So if there's any games you would like to see or any other content you think would be a good fit for the channel, please sound off in the comments below. Jumping across to the graphics menu, the layout was a little bit different to what I'm used to. You can really tell it's a console port, especially since I'm playing on Xbox Game Pass on a Windows PC, but the game was giving me PlayStation inputs no matter how many times I tried to get it to accept my Xbox controller and change it to Xbox inputs. But luckily I've got a PlayStation controller sitting here, so I just ended up using that. But what is that about anyway? Digging a little bit deeper into the graphics settings, I did start to see some more familiar options. There were some presets called Prioritize FPS, also prioritize resolution, and also the standard and custom ones that you generally expect to see. I also hunted down motion blur and turned that off because motion blur is not a good feature. I hate it. I'll always turn it off. Anyway, rant over. So to start off, we're going to leave it on the standard preset and give it a good old college try to see how it goes. I'm going to put up the minimum spec for the game at the moment because as you can see, our hardware is right on the line for the minimum spec of this particular game. But that's at 720p, that's not at 1080p. So I'm not really hopeful, to be honest, on how this game's going to run, but let's jump in and see how it goes. Thanks to the power of editing, we are now past all the story and character creation, and my fears are starting to be realized a little bit. The game is stuttering when moving around the camera and calling new animations and making the game's 1% lows tank pretty badly. With a game where you need to be accurate with parry timings and dodging, this ain't gonna cut the mustard. Having them drop to 6 frames per second during a fight is really going to mess up your flow. This is a common misconception when looking at frame rate. Your average isn't as important as your 1% and 0.1% lows. This is where you feel the biggest impact and can ruin a gaming experience. So let's not try to make a purse out of a pig's ear and try some other settings. See if we can get those 1% lows up and have the game feeling a lot smoother. Back in the menu now, let's set it to prioritize FPS. This looks like it's turned off a lot of the settings in relation to shadows and clouds and volumetric fog and other lighting effects. So hopefully this will have a positive result on our FPS. And as always, the only way to find that out is to bully some enemies. And my lord, straight away we have a massive difference to our lows. During this fight, the 1% lows never dropped below 20 FPS and the 0.1% lows stayed in an acceptable 17 FPS. This is huge as it allows you to follow what's going on in the game so much easier, making it a lot smoother and just nicer to play in general. Now normally I would say put a fork in it, she's done, job's an onion, but let's see if we can get at least a little bit more eye candy out of the game while still maintaining an acceptable frame rate. After all, that's what this is all about, optimizing our games to get them to run on our lovable potato. Flicking back to the standard settings, let's see how it performs during a boss encounter. Bearing in mind that this game wants you to parry lots and dodge around the screen, we really need to have the ability to do that by reading visual cues. And yep, just as I suspected, our lows are tanking, with our 1% sitting at 15 FPS and our 0.1% lows below 10 FPS. And while it's still kind of playable, it really isn't optimal. I didn't test this game at 720p and maybe I should have, but in reality I feel that's just way too much of a hit fidelity wise to make it worth the money if you're purchasing the game outright. Maybe if you have it on Game Pass and you have lower spec hardware, it might be worth messing around with, because honestly during my time with the game I was having a blast. So I feel if you're determined, you can still have a good time with it if you're willing to give some of that graphical fidelity back, though at the end of the day, that would be up for you to decide. Up on screen, we have our FPS comparison chart, and yeah, if you want to play this game on lower spec hardware, I really recommend to prioritize FPS or at most the standard settings. Otherwise, you'll not only be fighting the enemies and bosses in game, you'll also be fighting those frame drops, and if you've played a Souls-like game before, you'll know how much of a pain in the ass that is. So, thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of the video, and as always, if there's something you want to see, don't forget to let me know in the comments and hit that bell so you know when another video drops. We'll be doing these weekly, so your support means a heck of a lot. Thanks all, and keep gaming.